Okay, so let's just start where we normally start, riding horse. So just feeling ourselves just slotting into gravity, which requires the sacrum to hang pendulously, which means it's going to swing forwards a tiny bit. And just feel the posture. So you've got a round shape with the arms, and you've got a round shape with the legs. Yeah, so normally when we stand, our legs are straightening to keep us in position. So now our legs are bending to keep us in position. So this is what they say in the classics of Tai Chi. They say, keep to a yielding mind. So you have the two phases, yield and attack, or breathing out and breathing in. And we emphasize the out breath, the yielding. So I'm doing this to the ground. I'm not doing this to the ground. I'm doing this with the ground. So I'm beckoning the ground up into my dantian. So for that, I have to really relax across the sacrum, and I have to just allow my knees to drift out with this feeling of being on the outside edges of my feet a little bit. Then I have to press down my big toes so that they don't peel off the ground. And that emphasizes and strengthens the arch of the feet. And just that feeling that you're letting go, letting go, letting go. You're obviously having to tighten as well, otherwise you'd be falling down. But the emphasis of the mind is on the letting go. And if you can, just trying to feel the two. So part of me is just with this, just letting go, like I'm sort of expanding and drifting outwards. But right in the core of that, there'll be a rising, strengthening, coming together, like a crystallization. Yeah, so what they say is that each of these centers, but particularly the dantian and the heart, acquire like a crystalline quality, like a hardness, but it doesn't come from concentrating on hardness. It comes from concentrating on the expanding softness, and then that having to produce a natural hardness to balance what you're doing. Yeah, so the important thing is just really how you're on the ground, this feeling that this is happening. So let's just start just moving side to side a little bit and just allow the spine just to tilt so that you get this feeling that as you come into the foot, that outside edge is beginning to scoop under and produce a circuit like this. And then as I slip into this foot, and the more I can feel myself sinking and flowing down, the more that energy will circulate and come up the other side. Yeah, so we just want to see circuits all the time rather than just flows along a line. I'm sinking here so that something can rise here. I'm sinking here. That's it. So just really feeling the roundness here. It's like the scoop of a digger, or like an ice cream scoop, you know, that where you scoop the ice cream, it rolls the ice cream up into like a ball. So there's that sense here, something is being coiled up. And just feel the relaxation here, like a really expansive openness and emptiness, so that the ice cream can actually coil up into it. So you need space here. And that's difficult. We've got to really release across the sacroiliacs, across the sacrum. And just feeling it as like a relaxation. So everything that we do, we would like it to feel as though it's happening naturally because something inside me is letting go, rather than because I'm imposing something. So gravity is doing the work for me. Ooh. Yeah, and so, we have our two ways of moving side to side. So the sinking into the leg and then letting the leg be like a trampoline or like a spring that's bouncing me out. So let's just come into this a while and then we'll see what the other one, how the other one works. So I sink into the leg and then the leg starts springing me up. So the important thing is that my mind is light enough, my mind is cheerful enough to feel the energy coming up as I'm sinking into it. So I'm sinking into the leg and I feel the leg just squeezing energy up. It must be doing that, otherwise I'd be falling down. I'd hit the ground with my torso. So as I sink into the leg, the spring of the leg is already returning the energy. Then there comes a point when the energy is strong enough to take my body. So we want this sense that it's not my leg pushing me back. It's the energy that the leg is producing that's pulling me. The energy starts coming up and then there's a point where that pulls my body with it. But for that, you need a really cheerful mind. So the absolute opposite of depression. So what we're looking for all the time really is otherness, yeah? Is like the core of otherness in everything that we do. So it seems as though I'm just sinking into this leg, but the leg is producing something else. So that's like an otherness. It's like something that's surprising, something that's a little bit unexpected. Yeah, and they're saying now that basically depression is just the loss of the other. Everything is the same. Everything is you, drowning in self. So here I'm sinking down. Something takes me by surprise, and I just go with it. Ooh. And these effects are so subtle. It's very easy to override them. And if you can't feel it, you just induce it. You just make believe. You put on your princess costume and just pretend, yeah? So sink here and something comes up. And it's a beautiful feeling. It's one of those things you could just do all day because you can feel how it's cleansing and it's lifting. It's just bringing you up out of the mundane. So gravity gets you down, literally. So it will actually depress if you let it. Yeah, there was a philosopher in America, and she was doing a thesis, a dissertation on, she was a theologian, like a philosophical theologian, doing a paper on how God is gravity. because gravity is just the force of attraction. Yeah. And then she began to work with it and just realized that if anything, gravity is the devil. Yeah. Because the only way you have of dealing with gravity is to produce the opposite in order to produce a balance. Yeah. So everything is pulling at you. Every object in the world is pulling at you. And so we need to produce a natural counter to that, like almost like something inside us is fighting that all the time. Not by rejecting the world, but just by having that inner force that's holding us together. Sink down and something comes up. And just feel the breathing. In a way, the breath is everything, because basically everything is breathing. Everything breathes. The day breathes. The year breathes. The lunar cycle breathes. Yeah. Your digestion breathes. Yeah. And the thing about breathing is you need both phases. You can't just breathe in all the time. There has to come that out breath. Yeah, so for me, this is very like just floating in the sea and just letting the current sweep you one way. So it's like you come in with a wave, a little wave, and then you're washed out as the water goes back out into the sea. So there's this endless rhythm. And the rhythm is complex. You know, every now and then you'll get a strong wave. And the best way to enjoy it is just abandon yourself to the rhythm. So you just become part of the sea. And always this sense that this rhythmical process that you're part of is much bigger than you are. So you're just a little bit of this, but by abandoning yourself to it, you attain a largeness of the system that you're part of. This is what's very important. This is what the scientists are saying now. We've just lost the ability to abandon ourselves to natural process because we've produced such an unnatural environment for ourselves where we are boss, we are in control. And so if we had been more of the environment, we would never have allowed the planet to get into the state it is. It would have just hurt us as much as it hurts the environment. Yeah. So wow. Oh. Now, so as I sink into the foot, the sense is that the thing that's coming up is sort of over here. Yeah, so my system is always expanding. Okay, now let's just bring it to here. And again, just feeling that it's really, as I sink and let myself spread across here, let the sacroiliacs open a little bit. That's when I embrace the ground, or as Nitzan puts it, grab the ground. So I want the sense that my feet are sort of going down and joining together right underneath, like a couple of meters beneath the ground. So roundness is accepting and yielding, like the embrace of the mother. And so when the mother embraces the child, it's not just that the arms are going out like this, there's a real softening and expansion across the chest. So the heart softens as well and expands, because she wants to take that child not just into her arms, but into her heart. Yeah? And that's when they will feel real comfort. Yeah? So what in Tai Chi we call hollow chest. Okay. And now let's just breathe. So what we're trying to do here is just get the spine breathing. Feel the spine folding forwards as I breathe out, and feel the spine extending as I breathe in. And we just want to make the spine as clear and fluid and flexible as possible. Yeah? So it's difficult this, doing it on your own. If you just had someone there, they wouldn't have to even be a Tai Chi person, just to look at you and see where your spine is showing a reluctance to bend. And then they could just gently place their hand there as you're doing it, and it would just bring your awareness to the place, and you then just start bending it. Yeah. So most things we get wrong not because it's difficult to get it right, but because we're just not aware. So here I'm really, and the main place on the spine is just here, just at the back in the middle, above the Min Meng and just beneath the shoulders. And so there's a point here that I just need to make sure it really presses in, so that my head can just go right back. And if you just keep on going, then it will gradually soften. Yeah, so all of these exercises should really be done for quite a long time. You know, like 20 minutes or so. But they'll only be effective if you're gradually going deeper and deeper over that time. If you get bored and the mind starts wandering, then you're doing more harm than good, basically. So just don't let your head look at the screen. I know it's a marvelous sight, but in a way, that's the biggest drawback really of the eyes. They do tend to lock onto things, and then the neck gets stiff. Then the head is no longer part of the spine. We want the head just to be the top of the spine. So here, your head is what's moving the most if you discount the hands. Your feet are moving the least, obviously. And it's your head that's moving the most. It's really whipping back. That's it. So the heart is basically lifting here. So you want this sense that at its limit, the heart is coming out of you, but then it instantly comes back in as you go the other way. So here, so the heart is lifting up to the heavens, and then it comes back down again. That's it. So your heart is doing two things really. It's just sending a little bit of earth energy up, but it's also grabbing a little bit of heaven energy and bringing that down. Yeah. So your heart is what's responsible for you being this communicator between heaven and earth. You know, the way the Chinese say that's the function of a human being, is to allow, to channel the two energies up and down. Like a tree. A tree does it much better than we do. You just want to feel, you know, when at the apogee here at the top, you can only hold it for like a split second before it just naturally goes back. And this is the way it should be. You can't sustain. You just have to let it breathe. You mustn't hold your breath. You can stretch it, but don't break the flow. So, yeah, and it's this phase really that's the most important, because that's the bit we don't normally do. You know, we're normally, basically, and I really believe that every middle-class person nowadays is depressed. And it's largely because we just don't use our bodies. You know, we never have to do difficult tasks. And so this is really opening because these two muscles here are pulling, yeah. So this is just imagine you never get into this sort of posture nowadays. It would just be considered too much, a little bit sort of brazen and impolite. On Tuesday, Mark told us a story, which I was really taken by, about when he was an electrician and he was on a job and he had to pull a cable through a conduit in the ceiling. So the cable was coming out and he had to pull it to attach it to the electricity source. And it just wouldn't come. He was pulling with like all his might, it just wouldn't come. So he braced himself against a wall and just gave it all he had, yeah? And just, it started moving, but as it did, he heard all these click, 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 all these cracks in his spine, and just thought, oh shit, I've hurt myself. But then when he came away from the wall, he just said, I felt amazing. Yeah, so it's, in a sense, what we need, we all need multiple osteopathic adjustments. Yeah, we need some skilled osteopath to click each vertebra. Because the pressures of life, the fact that we're lazy, that we never really need to use ourselves properly, just means that the spine sort of, it's in a deflated state all the time. It's collapsed into itself. The same way that a noisy mind is just a mind that's collapsed into itself. So just feeling the breath, extending the breath, changing its rhythm. So the average person breathes in and out about 14 times a minute, whereas the Zen master can sort of reduce it to 3 or 4. So they just have a bigger range. This is what we want to sort of just do, is extend our range. Go out of our comfort zone, go out of what we know, and venture into the unknown. Yeah, and because people never, the middle class don't work physically hard, they never experience a quiet mind, because it's really only after you've really blasted your body with your spirit by doing a laboring jog, or even just going for a run. Yeah? And when you come back and you just sit down before the shower and you just feel the body just full of energy and full of movement. And this is just completely quiet. It's not thinking, it's not talking, it's just experiencing the feelings. Reach, 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 reach. Now so part of you is just really enjoying this, because nothing could be more enjoyable basically than this exercise, than just breathing with your whole body. So part of you is with the sensation. But now we want to just bring another part of our mind down to these spinal erectors, so these thick muscles either side of the lower spine, and just feel them actually doing the work. So they start tightening and that expands you out. So now your mind is more with the origin of the movement rather than the effect of the movement. So you're tightening those muscles in the back, and then you're just allowing them to slowly relax. So let them really stretch here and then tighten them again. Not too much, otherwise it will just become tense. So you're getting those muscles to really breathe. So the heart is opening, but that is underpinned by a strong, tight lower back. So part of me is really opening and relaxing. Another part of me must be getting really quite tight. Otherwise, there isn't the balance. and to get more into those muscles, which is what we're trying to do now, you just got to visualize a little bit of resistance. So again, just like you're in the pool, so here you're really having to pull those muscles to get the arms to push the water. And then you really have to use the muscles at the front to get the arms to come back. Just trying to feel all that strength in the lower back belly complex. This is my belly tightening. And this is my back tightening. So they're sort of both tight all the time, but here the back is just taking a little bit from the belly, and then the belly takes it back. So really yin yang. So the effects are still there, the feelings are still there, but you're just not focusing on them. You're focusing on the machine that's producing the movements. Tighten the lower back gently. And then really stretch the belly muscles so that they will just naturally pull back. Yeah, so it's by using the body like this that it's almost like the body melts and starts to flow a little bit, like a really viscous fluid, liquid that's just beginning to sort of flow. And so John used to use the image of magma, so like molten rock coming out of a volcanic vent. You can just think of like treacle or something, or syrup, you know, it's got... Ooh. Okay, so let's just bring it back. Yeah. So when we come to the work, the first thing we have to do really is just get into it, relax into it, because the way we live our lives generally makes us a little bit tense and distracted. So this is running 10 to the dozen, and the body's just a bit tight because of this, yeah? So we work, and that gets us just opening and feeling like we're flowing out from the center, yeah? And then, you know, if you have a mind that's just naturally inquisitive, a mind that's suspicious, yeah? So a mind that as soon as it sees something and settles into it, it starts thinking, oh, maybe there's something else, yeah? Maybe there's something beneath the surface that I'm missing. Yeah? That's the sort of mind you need. It's like, you know, the Nietzsche, Freud, Marx, yeah? They call them the masters of suspicion, yeah? So Freud, you know, he had this, you know, he saw the world, the bourgeois world, being all neat and tidy with all these sort of Victorian type people, well dressed, and then just realized that when you cut that, it bled. Underneath that beautiful veneer, there was something really depraved, yeah? And he called that the unconscious. Yeah. So this idea that beneath the surface that's presenting itself, there's a completely different reality. Yeah. So as we settle into the relaxation and the softness, slowly we start to feel the thing at the core that's actually begging for our attention to come back to. And then we just see that the relaxation is just a surface effect. Yeah. So just feeling these two muscles at the back, the bodybuilders call them pythons, snakes, yeah? So we just want to feel that they these are responsible for connecting my legs to my arms. Yeah. So most of the tasks that we do during the day only require legs and arms. Yeah. So if I'm moving things around, if I'm doing the cooking or the washing up, or I'm taking a plate, so here, I don't need any more than the strength of my arms, and my legs are just moving me around. If you're doing really strong physical tasks, yeah, you'd need these muscles, yeah, because you'd have to use body as one unit. And so these muscles would become the most important. This is what we want. So just feeling, this is the thick part of the snake. The tail of the snake extends down underneath your heel, and the head of the snake extends up into your hand. Yeah. And these snakes are just rumbling. They're almost in slow motion. Yeah. And there's because they're alive, they've got all these processes going on inside them. So they're sort of throbbing with a sort of subterranean rhythm, like the rhythm of the unconscious, really. And then the energy that they work on and express is just directly channeled from the unconscious, through the libido. Yeah. So it's just something coming up and coming out. Okay. And now, before we do the spirit bit, let's just turn. And again, just really feeling these muscles. So what we want to get away from is turning the hips. Yeah. So normally in Tai Chi, basically we interpret turn the waist as just turn the hips. Yeah. So we've got like a circular action, like whipping the arms around like this. Now we just want to really use the muscles here. And so for that, you have to just really imagine you are really in water. So you're having to use the leg coming up into the muscle at the back to actually turn yourself. And if anything, the waist is turning against the hips. Yeah, so you can just press the foot into the ground and just turn against this resistance, and you'll feel the leg pressing up into the muscles at the back and getting them to arch you backwards. Yeah, so this exercise is not just like a relaxation centrifugal exercise, it's an exercise for getting energy from the ground up to the leg and into the upper body. Yeah, so just really seeing how it's the turn, it's the twist in the hips that actually dredges that energy up. Yeah, so. So I have to really catch the ground and sink down into the foot, so I have some purchase. And so this is another skill we need to develop, almost like a bloody mindedness that can actually just make the exercise a hell of a lot more difficult than it really is, to make it just more realistic, to make it work the body. Because we're just really trying to just locate the mind that gets things done, the mind that doesn't prevaricate or procrastinate, the mind that's there almost before. So the martial artist's mind, not the meditator's mind. Yeah. So just, and it's just a mind that's totally unsqueamish. It doesn't mind getting its hands dirty, and it doesn't mind doing unpleasant things. Yeah, and if you find your mind wandering, if you find yourself thinking to yourself about something that's disconnected from what you're doing, then basically you're not working hard enough. You just need to find a way of just making it more hard work, and then your mind won't be able to wander, because you'll need everything you have to get the job done. So basically, a wandering mind is just an indication of laziness. Yeah. And if you find yourself going too fast, it's just because the liquid isn't viscous enough. That's it. That looks great. Just feel that strength in the chest. You know, in order, when the lower back is really strong and working well, you get a lot brought up into the chest and the shoulders, which is natural and good. Okay, so now let's just bring it back. See, like when you immerse yourself in the pool and the water's there, it's on your skin, it's pressing against you. Yeah. You can't just keep a little bit of it away because you don't want that bit to get wet. You just get totally wet. So this is the feeling here. It's like reality is pressing in with a little bit more ruthlessness and insistence than normal. Yeah, so you've got the atmospheric pressure, which is bearing in on you, trying to crush you. Yeah. You know, when you go really deep down in the sea and the forces just become, they say that, when those free divers, that dive and hold their breath, when they go as deep as they do, their body volume is reduced by 1/3 from the external forces of the water. So there's that sense here, it's like I'm being pressed in, and that forces me to become sort of determined and sort of push against it with my own vitality. Yeah? In the same way that when the world pulls at me like this, I have to really pull myself in. Yeah. So just the same thing, but just the opposite. Yeah. So just feel that atmospheric pressure. The air is pressing in, it's squeezing you, almost like it's trying to wring you out. Yeah, so remember, we used to work with John, me and Charles. Yeah, so we'd start off with something, some technique, and we'd work on it together. And so we'd work on it solo together, and we'd also work on it as a technique for throwing the other person around. And that would very quickly whip it up into the realm of spirit. And there'd always become that point where it, without us really knowing it, it would sort of switch. And then when we brought our rational minds back to it, we realized we're actually doing the opposite of what we were doing right at the beginning. So me and Charles would just get really sort of, with our rational minds, would get sort of irritated. And this wasn't what we were doing. It's changed. We need to go back to what we were doing. And John would be delighted. We always used to say, what we were doing was yesterday's cold potatoes. You know, this is what's happening now. You know? Okay, now let's just go back to what we were doing right at the beginning. So with the roundness, just sinking into the foot and just feeling something. So instead of feeling something rising against my sinking, I'm feeling something rising up the other side of the circle. So as I sink into this foot, there's something coming up here. Because this is like the spirit, or what I call the spirit, probably isn't. Yeah. So as I sink into this foot, something rises here because of my sinking, but that becomes the call that draws me across. Yeah. So as I sink here, something appears, always on the outside. So like a little fairy that's sort of calling you, but then disappears as soon as you move towards it. And it's just an aspect of your own energy that's circulating with the environment. It's not just circulating inside you. It's circulating with the environment that you're in. It's so important, this. Because it's only really when you work like this that you communicate properly with nature. Yeah. So as I sink into this foot, something rises here, and then I notice it and it calls me, and then I'm drawn towards it. But it's just an aspect of my own energy. It's my own energy that's been colored by the occasion. And the image that always comes to my mind is Tinkerbell in the Disney Peter Pan. And she was always a bit grumpy because she was really jealous of Wendy. So she had spirit. She was a spirit with spirit. And always a little bit coy. You could never catch her. Peter could, of course, but. So there's something very sort of spontaneous about this. So suddenly there's a call and you just respond to the call. So there's no time. It takes time for your body to move because it has inertia. But for the spirit is of infinite speed. Suddenly, wow, hello. Yeah, so when you hear the call, your first response should be to embrace, should be to hug. It's like the beautiful story of St. Francis, you know, who hugged the leper. Yeah, he saw this person, and his first response, having spent a whole life being terrified of lepers, partly because he didn't want to catch it, and partly because they fucking stink of rotting flesh. His first response was just to open his arms and take them in. So here it's like you open up with this hollowness. It's the mother, it's the embrace of the mother. Ooh. And this really is something you could do all day. But just, you know, it really requires a lightness. You have to be really willing to let this reality possess you. If there's any skepticism or any grumpiness or resentment, or it might as well not be there. Yeah? It just won't be there. It's so easy to override energy. Wow. Like a bird, you know, the lark ascending in that beautiful Vaughan Williams piece, the solo violin, the skylark, it starts ascending and it just flies slowly up. And once it's come about 2 meters off the ground, it just starts singing and it doesn't stop again until it reaches the ground. And so many poets have used that as an image of spirit. Shelley being the most famous. Oh, blithe spirit. Wow. Yeah, so you've got the reality of the body, which we want to feel as though it's down here, sort of down chin and legs, and it's sinking and it's wrestling with the ground, it's tussling with the ground. But then you've got this reality of spirit, which is just floating around up here. And together they just work so well together. They're just absolute perfect complements, yeah? If I get too much into this world, it'll just become a fantasy and just an indulgence. If I get too much into the body, it'll just be a depression. So just whoa. I just feel it now. The opening relaxation phase of this, that's now the in-breath. Yeah? So now you're sucking the air in here. So it's very much to do with an exchange going on between you and the environment. You're taking the world in and then you're sending it out. You're taking the world in. You know, this is one of those exercises that John would just, I'd go down and he'd be, wanting to talk to him about something. I find him doing something like this. I think, oh, I better leave him to it. Come back 2 hours later and he's doing exactly the same thing. Yeah. And he'd have no idea that time had passed. Yeah? So that ability just to sink into the energy, just to become the energy. And if you get too much into the energy, it brings you up. And then you can feel that. And so you can then, so you've got part of your mind that's always balancing. It's always making sure that the equilibrium is maintained. Okay, so let's just. So that brings us out into this sort of expansive spirit world, whereas the one we just did before that really pressed in on us. Yeah. So all of these, they're just different facets of the reality that we inhabit. It's an immense richness. Yeah. And you have to allow it to sort of circulate. Yeah. So sometimes you just can't come to one of them because you're either tired from having done too much of it the day before, or it just isn't there anymore. Yeah. So you just work on what comes up, and then you'll naturally circulate through all the different facets, all the different principles. And it can take like a year or so to actually rotate through them all. A bit like cultivating the land. Yeah. You need to rotate the crop so that you don't deplete the soil. Now let's just do a little bit, just going backwards and forwards. And with this, so again, we want to sort of just come back to that feeling of being pressed. Something is pressing in on me. So my legs really have to work hard here, like I'm really having to wade through mud. Ugh. And I'm really having to push against something here. So it's not enough. I don't have enough strength in just my arms and my legs separate. I really need to get these muscles involved to link the arms and the legs. So, and just feel it when you really get into that muscle, your shoulders start working. It's just natural. So here the shoulder comes up in order to connect to the leg through that tight python. So you just have to really be able to imagine resistance. Otherwise, your body will just get it wrong. Yeah, so there's two G words, words that begin with G, that John really loved. One was glad or gladden. So that's the feeling of when the spirit is up, the dancing fairy. You know, you're glad, there's a gladness inside you. And the other one was grim. Yeah, so this is grim. This is just pushing you into your core. And it's your core that's really working. It's toiling and boiling and roiling and coiling. Yeah, so it's quite difficult to get into these muscles because we're just not used to it. Yeah? So you just got to really just work hard. And okay, let's just change it there. Yeah, so you're deep down in the ocean. The ocean is crushing in, it's squeezing the life out of you. So you're really having to fight back. So the more the water crushes in you, the more it pushes you into your own power. Yeah? Because your real power is in your core, it's around your spine. in your belly and in your back. So it's that strength that you're channeling into your shoulders and your arms. Ugh. And you can do the form like this, you know. In fact, you have to do the form like this, otherwise it's just pleasantly wafting your arms around. So feel the different actions of the pull and the push. This is really pulling in, and this is just extending out. So again, they're complements. This is what the body wants to do. Okay. Enough is enough. Okay, just feel the sinking. So gravity is basically vertical, but we aren't. We're circles. We're circular or spherical. So when I intersect with gravity, when I allow gravity into my body, it takes on like a circularity, which will then produce a funneling up the middle. Yeah. So as I'm standing here, there's a sense that this is happening, either to bounce yourself out or to bring the spirit up the other side. But then there's also a sense that this sinking is actually channeling a stream of energy up my middle, up my spine. And that's just coming out at the top of my head. And again, that is from the sinking. It's not because I'm straightening my legs, it's because I'm bending them in a round shape to produce a circuit rather than just a flow in one direction. So to produce that circularity, you really have to open across here, because that will just pull you into a linear up and down if you tighten here. And then just slowly start bringing yourself in. So it's like your energy is sort of just reaching out, almost like you're vaporizing, you're evaporating. Yeah. So now just the way they put it in the classics, in the old writings, is concentrate the spirit. Yeah. So that's something in you is just coming together and just becoming determined. The sort of determination you would need to throw yourself into the fight, yeah? And so something in you is just coming in. You're just bringing your mind to the Dantian and just making yourself just a little bit angry. You're not angry at anything. You're just using that feeling to bring your spirit together. And then we want to feel that when we step up into attention posture, basically it's because that has just become so tight, so that has become so concentrated, it's required me to bring my foot up. And now I'm all core now. It's like I'm just with my Dantian, with my muscles around my spine. So there's that website, Paul Brennan, I think he's a sort of Tai Chi guy, and I think he must have like a Chinese mother because he's translating all these old martial arts books, and it's a real resource. It's like my favorite website. And he's just translated Master Dong, who was like one of Yung Chen Fu's top students. And it's interesting, you know, when he's telling you how to do the next posture, always starts off, concentrate the spirit, loosen the hips, so the sacroiliacs and here, and turn the waist. So it's not turn the hips, use these muscles to produce the turn at the same time that this is just loosening out, and the same time that you're just ready to punch someone, you're just bringing your energy together so you can leap into the next posture. And then just a real sense that when you tighten these muscles, so you have to tighten them sort of individually, really. So when I tighten, so that, in other words, with a turn, with a twist, when I use that muscle, it just naturally brings the energy into the hand. Yeah. And so it's like when you see an animal prowling, like a big cat, and it's like they're using their whole body to move their heavy limbs. Yeah. So it's coming, everything is coming from their spine. So it's not this, yeah. So that's the feeling we would like. You know, everything that we do during the day requires these muscles. That's just, you know, if you get into that, you'll be practicing all the time. Yeah. Always think of the tomcat, you know, the tomcat that's been in the wars. So that's the sort of mind we would like, the mind of an old soldier. And you just don't have the energy to waste feeding this, yeah. What a waste of energy. Okay, let's finish.